It's taken me a number of years to figure out what makes a good LRB cover, but it's always based on things I spot in a very everyday routine really, lots of collecting little moments. One of the LRB covers is a chair just propped on a fence that I saw out a window. It just caught my eye and there was a real character to it, the way it sort of sat there and watched the train go by. Using the chinagraph pencil for this one was a way of giving it that fleeting, soft focus quality that feels like it could just dissolve in a moment. You could sneeze and it all blows away. My name's Jon McNaught and I'm one of the cover artists for the London Review of Books. Ready? In the summer, there was a particular train ride where the sun was setting on the sort of opposite side of the train to me. I did a painting which I quite liked and I thought had something, and I wanted to try and do a kind of winter version of it. Unfortunately, I was teaching in Glasgow, so I was on the train very early and I was sitting looking out the window and the sun just came up and suddenly it was exactly what I'd been after. So I managed to get probably about 100 photographs, and I've been working on some sketches, and I've got what hopefully will give that effect quite nicely now. A lot of the technique I use with the watercolours is quite related to printmaking really. It's kind of building up the image layer by layer and kind of using a pre-planned approach. So I do lots of little swatches and little plans, and I write little lists of the order so I can remind myself exactly what comes when. So I've sketched it out on the paper on this kind of nice hot press watercolour paper that I use, and then I'm going to cut out my shapes, the kind of reflection shapes of the main train window parts, and carefully stick those in place on my sketch. And then I've got masking fluid. I'm going to paint in a few more highlights so I can do a watercolour wash over the whole thing, and these areas remain completely clean. I'll always be taking photos, and all my sketchbooks are filled with little scribbles and notes, trying to catch down ideas. I'm always kind of mapping places out. It's just favourite spots really. Sometimes it's just a view across rooftops. It's a place where you can get unusually high and look down on some buildings. Or a particular train line where you can see something quite special. I always try to do at least one cover for every season. When the seasons change, you sort of notice things, you see things in a slightly different way. When it snows, obviously, is the most extreme one. Suddenly your whole everyday environment becomes completely transformed. At some point anyway, I send 5 or 6 little paintings or thumbnails to the editors and just say, let me know if any of these catch your eye, and they'll get back to me and say, oh, would you be able to get this particular one done for the next press cycle? I then will rework it as a larger scale watercolour painting or an ink painting. Or if I want more of a graphic approach, I'll use some of the tools and tricks of printmaking built up in layers, in the same way that I would make a lithographic print or a screen print. Sometimes I do screen print them, but for the purpose of the cover, I scan in the layers separately and then create the artwork in Photoshop. Okay, let's get going. I want to get the marks down nice and quickly and loosely so it sort of doesn't feel too still, I kind of want that sense of the fleeting glimpse that you get out a train window when all the foliage and trees around just suddenly breaks and you get a sudden view of distance. This was a particular summer cover. I think this summer didn't feel like the most summery of summers. It was quite a sort of stressful summer, I think, just in general, kind of in the world. Seeing this scaffold step going down to the sea felt very relatably kind of British coast, but at the same time visually quite tangled and not particularly relaxing, but still with a sense, I think, of making you want to go for a swim. This kind of just pull some details forward and leave some areas sort of more in the background. I'm going to paint these electric wires oddly the hardest bit. Missed a bit in the middle there, but I kind of quite like that. It's got quite a nice energy to it, so I think that's okay. This was November, so that time of year where you're walking around using all the kind of different shades of light bulb different people have, you know, the kind of the warm lights and the cold lights and the incredibly blue lights. This was a scene in Bristol. I think this is April, so it's spring. You're getting these longer days and these longer, kind of brighter evenings. Whenever I saw this site, I thought of the Philip Larkin line, I think the sun falling on the serene foreheads of houses. In my head, that's what this one is, is depicting. I always enjoy the autumn covers, and I just loved how these leaves just sat on the head of this this little car. Yeah, this is a really nice, bright, rich blue. With these watercolour washes, I have to keep a wet edge at all times, otherwise you end up getting a patchy finish. Need to remember to let it stop around here. I've probably got enough paint to work with to take us down to the fields. Going in with a dry brush to sort of absorb some of the paint that's gathered up. Otherwise you end up with dark edges. I'm just going to peel off the masking tape, revealing where the light reflection will be. Nice, always nice and crisp. So the reason I'm peeling this off now is I want these to be slightly knocked back. I want them to be kind of not bright white. I want the brightest thing on the page to be the sun rising. Exactly the same again with the wash. And it's quite magic when you do this. You kind of suddenly read it as a reflection. So I've mixed Rose Doré and Naples Yellow. I just want that slight sense of the warmth. Some Payne's Grey now to be the distant hills. When I send the artworks across, I'll have my own reading of them in a way, but it's always really interesting because sometimes I'll send a piece and it will sit for a few months, maybe even a couple of years, waiting for the right moment for it to be used. This is an example of one that the usage of it sort of changed how I saw the image. I think the power station was an incredible structure, and this horse grazing in the field in the mist with this kind of looming above it. It was quite sort of a beautiful and quiet and peaceful image, but it being used in this context of the what have we done responses from Europe after the Brexit vote at this time in January 2019. Suddenly that horse becomes very forlorn and quite dramatic in a way that I hadn't necessarily predicted before. And that's this sort of Stonehenge of LNER seat backs that's appearing. Oh, that's nice. Get rid of some of the masking fluid, just with an eraser. So now it's just getting the ghostly trees that are behind the window reflections. You don't want to be too subtle, otherwise it will disappear a little bit behind the wash that I do. I used to have a studio in Bristol above a lovely little shop called Makers, and one day when I was unlocking the door to go up to my studio, they were decorating in there, and they'd covered all their print racks and all the furniture with these white sheets. As an image, it felt very beautiful. It was a new start for the shop, and I think this was used in January 2020, so this was a kind of new year, kind of new start. It almost felt like freshly fallen snow or something like that. There's a real sense of curatorial care with the editors there, choosing exactly the right moment for an image. I also work as a cartoonist and graphic novelist, and I think the visual storytelling of that kind of comes into a lot of the work I do for the LRB as well. Sometimes I do love creating these more peopled scenes and these little stories, a sense of kind of your eye moving around and reading the page and spotting little things. This actually involves my brother and sister-in-law and my niece at the time there, who I sort of snuck in. This was a summer camping trip to Gillingham in Kent. As we were walking one evening, I spotted this swan pedalo in a scrapyard. And actually, following on from that, I've had lots of emails from people pinpointing exactly where that swan pedalo is. I'm not the only one to have spotted it. Despite having done the Bloomsbury cover and the Greenwich Park and a few very specific London covers, most of the time I like to keep these images quite geographically vague. You could be anywhere in the country. I would hope that it feels relatable and recognisable to people all over. This is the most recent cover. I've been doing lots of prints based on reflections and trying to capture the effect of ghostly lamps floating out the window when you look out in twilight or at night time. Back to the same theme as the first ever cover I did for the LRB back in April 2012. And actually a lot of the images I'm drawn to do have an element of optical illusion to them. If something seems quite hard to capture, my brain starts whirring, which is why I often come back to these kind of things that have this sense of a magic trick to them. There we go. Okay.